It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Property Podcast. I'm Rob D in my home office in Hertfordshire. With me is Rob D, but where are you, Rob? Good morning.
Good morning. I am joining you from my new home office in Rotterdam, where I'm currently overlooking a canal. I'm not wearing clogs. I can see bikes going past 2 out of 3 of the stereotypes I'm ticking off so far, but it's lovely here. Highly recommended.
Any windmills?
Yeah, I can literally see a windmill.
Oh, brilliant.
3 out of 4.
That's very impressive. But I'll tell you else what's impressive, Rob. We can do 3 weeks running on a budget-themed podcast.
Yeah, I know. If you don't care about this subject, well, you should, really, because it's going to affect everyone. So no apologies for talking about it. We will give it a bit of a rest after this, but it's worth exploring because when we did the meetup and we did the summit, we got so many questions about this. It's on everyone's mind. So it's worth talking about again. And this week we're concentrating on whether you should create a limited company for your property portfolio. Always a hot topic, even more so now. So we've got that for you, plus the news and the reviews and the resources. Next week, a non-budget related topic, but this one, I'm pretty sure that you'll be wanting to pay attention because this is something that comes up all the time.
Now, we have been doing stuff besides answering questions on the budget, you'll be pleased to know. And amongst that, we've been super busy at Yellow Lettings and RMP Property. We've been going on a bit of a hiring spree. Yellow Lettings has made several hires already. RMP's been making hires. Hello to Andrea, and hello to Mo, and hello to Nigel, some of the people who've joined the companies recently. But that's not enough. We need more. So we, on the Property Hub, have a small jobs board. If you're interested in any of the roles we're about to talk about, then please go and have a look. You know, if you'd like to work with Rob and myself, in fact, no, scrap that. That's probably not an incentive. If you'd like to work for one of the 2 great companies that we run, then go and check out the Property Hub's jobs board. RMP is looking for a marketing manager. RMP is looking for a general manager. The marketing manager is a remote role, so you can work from home. And Yellow Lettings is looking for portfolio reps, so people on the ground for the company in Sheffield, London North and London South. So there we go, 5 jobs, Rob.
Yeah, not bad, eh? They say the employment's increasing, and I'd say that's largely because of us, because we have been going nuts recently. But we've brought some brilliant people into the team, and we are hungry for more. So if you are interested in finding out more, then you can go over to the jobs board from the forum, or if you're not sure where to find it, just go to the show notes and we'll link to it straight over from there. The show notes for this week are at thepropertyhub.net/LTD or not.
So the news story this week really wraps into the theme of what we've been talking about the last few weeks and today, and that is the budget. And this week's news story, there's a petition that goes out. So if you've not seen it before, you can actually put petitions into Parliament. And if you get a certain number of responses, people signing up, then the government have to reply. So that number is 10,000. And then if you get to 100,000 signatures, the government then has to debate it in Parliament. Now, this petition's only just gone out. I signed it yesterday morning and it was at 1,300. And already, less than 24 hours later, the following morning, it's at 4,000. So it's really gaining momentum. If you are angry or even slightly miffed at the changes that George Osborne's brought in the most recent budget, then you should have a look at this and consider signing it yourself, because if it gets over to 10,000, which hopefully by the time you're reading this it'll be close to doing, if not done, then at least the government has to acknowledge it. But if we can push it nearer that 100,000 and go through it, then they have to debate it in Parliament. Rob, it takes, 1 minute to do?
Less. And actually, fair play to the government. Not something I say often. The website is really good, and the usability is great. It literally just takes a few seconds. So do it, pass it if you're part of any groups of other investors, pass it around a bit. I'm normally a realist / pessimist when it comes to this kind of thing. I think, well, it's not going to make any difference, but you never know. It's worth a try. It takes hardly any time. I was speaking to an accountant yesterday, and I said to him, do you think there's any chance of getting this overturned or modified in any way? And he seemed to think that while unlikely, there is some chance of getting concessions. So there's absolutely nothing to lose by trying.
Yeah, there's nothing to lose. But at the very least, I know a lot of property investors, this is something I said in the Hub yesterday, a lot of property investors voted this government in. So if you're unhappy, and in particular if you voted for this government, then you should let them know, because you got them in. So let them know that they've peed you off pretty much straight away after doing that. I think it's just to make them realise how many people they've annoyed or frustrated is no bad thing at all.
Exactly. So let's get into the topic of the week, which builds on this, really. And I think you've got to be careful at times like this, because special interest groups, of which we are one, always get hacked off whenever you do anything that goes against their interests. Even if it's in the interests of the majority of people, there's always going to be someone who's annoyed. And you've got to kind of look at it and go, well, am I being unreasonable here? Is this really for the greater good? Do I just need to suck it up? So are property investors right to be annoyed by this? Well, yes, I think so in this situation, because their idea was clearly to calm the buy-to-let market. I completely understand why that needs to be done. There is a balance to be struck between buy-to-let and private ownership, but the way they've gone about it doesn't seem particularly fair. So to give a very quick recap, what we're talking about here is mortgage interest relief. So whereas at the moment you can just deduct your mortgage interest along with all your other costs before you arrive at your profit, that is no longer going to happen. Essentially, you can't deduct mortgage interest as a cost at all. You just have to do the rest of your accounts, leave that out completely, get to your profit figure, and then apply a 20% basic rate allowance later. I've done a blog post about this that explains it as simply as I can, and there's a worked example which makes it all a bit clearer. I'll link to that in the show notes as well, thepropertyhub.net/LTD or not. But the upshot of it is there are unfairnesses in there, such as the fact that you can have what's in reality, if you're highly leveraged, a loss-making property that you still have to pay tax on. And that just seems a bit bizarre to me and not particularly fair. And so if you are highly leveraged, it can have a big impact. And the other thing going around was them saying that only 1 in 5 landlords will be affected. That may be the case, but 1 in 5 landlords probably own a lot more properties, because there are a small number of people who own a lot of property. And also, for reasons that I go into in this blog post as well, it's actually not the case that basic rate taxpayers will be unaffected, which is what they're claiming. So this is a big deal. This is why people are talking about it. This is great news if you're an accountant, not such good news for the rest of us. And this is why we're now talking about this topic again. Should you create a limited company? This is always something that comes up. It's something that gets asked on the Property Hub every so often, and there's always a debate about it. And that's always been the case. But now, because of this latest change, which affects individual investors but not companies, this debate has come back and added even more fuel to that. So it's not a straightforward yes-no question. It never has been. It still isn't. But we're going to try to give you an idea during this episode of whether, depending on your circumstances, it's something you might want to consider or not.
Yes, so there's been a very simplistic view that, oh, well, the government's done this, let's form a company because we'll be all right. Might be not the case. We'll look at that in a minute. But why would you want to set up a company? Why are people saying you should do this? Well, first of all, corporation tax within companies, so the tax you pay on your profits, in the UK, actually, compared to most of the countries, is low. There's a few that are lower, but as a major economy, 20% is pretty competitive, paying 20% tax. That number is actually going down to 18% over time. Eventually, when you set this up, you could be paying 18% tax on any of your profits, which is much better than the 40 or 45% you could be paying if you're a higher tax rate payer now. So the low tax incentives are certainly one that's going to draw people to using a company. The next reason why you would consider using a mortgage is you can still offset your mortgage costs against your profit. So this is what the uproar is about, that you can't do this anymore as an individual. But as a company, you can. Again, there are more incentives for people to be moving into a company, the fact you can do that. Then there are these added on bonuses as well. Inheritance tax is a big issue for property investors because you build up this wealth over time, and then for a lot of people, they want to pass it on. But as an individual, if you haven't set yourself up right, your family or whoever you want to pass that on to could be hit with a huge tax bill when you die. If you put it into a company and set it up correctly, that inheritance tax bill can pretty much go away. So not only can you pay lower taxes, continue to offset your mortgage costs against the profit, but you've also got inheritance tax benefits. So this is sounding great, isn't it? And the other thing is, people have always been wary of moving into a company for this reason, and the reason is lending. People have always been wary of doing it because they've said, oh, well, you can't get mortgages or the mortgages aren't very competitive. That's already changing. And I foresee it getting better as well, because mortgage companies will go, oh, wait there's definitely more of a market here now, let's start lending in it, and it gets more competitive. If you look at the pension reforms, that's what they did then. They started bringing out products for people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and even some products for people over 100. The mortgage companies follow the money. Surprising that, isn't it? So I think a lot more will move into this sector and lend to companies. Metro Bank, for example, already lend, and they lend at under 4%. So a very competitive rate. You need to set up an account with them, and it's something I'm considering doing myself, actually. I'm looking at my options now. But that is currently my favourite runner at the moment because it seems very, very good and competitive. And they have great service as well, apparently. Rob, you can tell us more about that. But all these reasons I've mentioned are meaning that a lot of people are considering setting up a company. So it's a no-brainer, right?
Well, no, surprisingly. Oh, it'd be a short episode. It does sound great, but why wouldn't you set up a company? There are very good reasons why it's not right for everyone. The first of those is the potential for double taxation if you need to take income out of the company alongside the income that you've already got from employment or your own business or whatever it is. That comes about because you're paying corporation tax of what's currently 20%, I believe, going down to 18%. Then you're also going to have to pay tax on the dividends when you pay yourself out of the company. Now, having a corporate structure does give you flexibility around that. There are other ways of extracting money. There are ways of dividing profits up between family members. It's nice that you can be flexible about it, but you still have this essential double taxation problem. Another drawback is that if you've got a portfolio already, so you're not thinking about, oh, I'm just about to start, how should I approach this? But you've already got a portfolio under your control, then you could generate a serious tax bill in the process of moving it over. So you can't just decide that you've got a property in your own name and you want to give it to a company. You have to effectively sell the property to your company at the market rate. That can give rise to capital gains tax, although, as we'll see later, that's not necessarily the case. Also, stamp duty. So if you've got properties that are over the stamp duty threshold, then when you sell that property to your company, just as if you sold it to anyone else, there would be stamp duty to pay. So although moving to a corporate structure can save you some pain long term, there could be a significant amount of short term pain, and you have to weigh those two things up. Another drawback, potentially, is lending. Rob mentioned that lending is getting better, and I completely agree that I think that the market will open up. But at the moment, if you've got mortgages in your properties, then you need to get your current lenders on side. So you either need to speak to your existing lender and have them be okay with shifting it to a company, or you need to redeem those mortgage and refinance everything. Either way, it's going to be time, it's going to be cost, it could be higher rates. There's going to be complication there. And finally, within a company, there are no CGT allowances. So if you're planning on selling properties at any point and they've gone up in value, which you hope that they have, then that will give rise to capital gains tax. If you own that property in your own name, then you've got a capital gains tax allowance of, I think it's £11,000 a year at the moment. So if you are a couple, then that means £22,000 of your gain is tax-free. Then there are also things like private residence allowance. So if you move into the property or you have lived there at any point, then there are allowances you can claim there. Basically, there are things that you can do to minimise capital gains tax if you own it in your own name. If it's in a company, that's not an option. So if you are planning to sell properties at any point, then you could be in the position where you've shifted into a company to save you some money each year, but then that's wiped out and then some by the extra capital gains tax that you have to pay in the future. So very good reasons why you would want to set up a limited company, but also very good reasons why you wouldn't. So where does that leave us?
Well, let's look at who should then. So who should set up a limited company for their property portfolio? Well, anybody who's starting out and is doing it for the long term should pretty much definitely start a company. Why? Well, if you are in it for the long term and you're not looking to draw down on the income today, so let's say you're going to build a portfolio and it's for you to retire or finish work in, say, 10 years' time, whatever it may be, then that means you don't need the income now. So you carry on your day job, set up a limited company, start investing in it, and then pay the corporation tax, which is lower than the taxes you'll be paying as an individual over time, roll your profits up in that company, invest in that company, and then when you want to stop work, then start drawing down from the company instead. That is the way that a lot of people now get into property investment will operate. So the people who work with me at RMP, we always work with people for the long term. We're not anybody who wants to do short term, get rich quick stuff that we can't help them with. Anybody who wants to set themselves up for the future, this is what we'll be now saying to them. Also, anyone who's just done a few deals, if you've just got started and you've only done one or two, but you plan to do more, then setting up a company, for the reasons I've just explained, is probably something worth considering as well. So from now on, that's what I'm going to do. And then maybe you can get those properties into the company at some point in the future. So that, again, anybody who's just starting out but is in it for the long term as well, then, yeah, consider setting a company up. Now, if you have a lot of properties but you don't have mortgages on them, so they're unencumbered, then you might want to consider moving it into a company. You probably should. If you've got 8 or more properties, then you might be able to get incorporation relief, which means that the tax hit you take from moving your portfolio from a personal status into a company could be vastly reduced, if not wiped out. There may be stamp duty, but the tax that you would have paid, it comes down dramatically. That makes it still attractive to move it into a company. If you've got mortgages, if you've got a large portfolio with mortgages, then Rob's already explained that it might be difficult moving it over. But if you've got no mortgages on your portfolio, or most of them haven't got mortgages on them, then you might want to consider moving it over to a company because of incorporation relief. There's definitely certain people who should be doing this. Also, people who've got a company themselves, a business or are contractors and have a limited company because of that, you should seriously consider it as well. I'll talk about that in a bit. But there are certainly people who should absolutely be considering this option.
Yeah, so that's who should. Who might this not be right for? Well, the big one, I think, is anyone who uses rent to supplement their income now and has other income as well. And that's because of the whole double taxation thing that we talked about. You're making savings if you're a higher rate taxpayer, then because of the whole interest relief thing, you'll end up better off if it's within a company, but then that will then be wiped out by the double taxation. So Rob talked about the long term. If it is your plan to have this as an income in retirement, perhaps, then that's fine. If you need the income now, less likely to be effective. Also, it might not be suitable for established landlords who have used mortgages. So that's just the flip side of what Rob was talking about. You've got this issue where you need to either remortgage everything or you need to get approval from your lenders. If you're sitting on historically very low tracker rates, you're sitting there at 1 or 1.5% and have been for years, then you're not going to want to move away from those rates just so you can form a company. So you've got to weigh all these factors up. Also, I mentioned capital gains tax before. So anyone whose model is not to hold properties for the very long term, but whose model is to experience some growth, sell, lock in the gains, and then go and buy somewhere else, less likely to be attractive because all the capital gains tax allowances aren't there. There will, of course, be a tipping point depending on the size of your portfolio, but as a rule, if you're going to be turning properties over, it might not work. So as a very rough guide, that's the kind of people who might want to be looking at it and the kind of people who might not. There are so many different factors to weigh up. And if you just blindly do it, then you might go, brilliant, I'm saving money over here, but not realize that you're actually costing yourself more money here, here, and here. So it's not simple. It's impossible to give kind of general advice which is going to be true for everyone. But that's kind of an outline for you. But Rob, there's another kind of a subset of investors who you mentioned that you had something up your sleeve for.
Yeah, for these investors, you're going to love us. This is brilliant. So you didn't think I was going to be this positive on a budget-themed episode, but actually, for anybody who falls into this bracket, if you're not doing this, then, yeah, you're definitely going to be leaving some 5-star reviews here on iTunes. Right, okay. Here's what you can do. If you are a business owner or a contractor who has themselves set up in a limited company, you can be in a much better position if you're not doing this. So currently, many business owners and many contractors, they'll make their profits, and then if they want to invest in property, they'll take out their profits and then invest, which means that often they're taking a big tax hit of 40% to extract those profits. Yes, they may do it through dividends, but they use those dividends to live off, so they end up paying a pretty hefty tax bill to get it out the company. Not great, but the long-term benefits of property are there, so that's why we do it. However, what you can do now is if you set up a property company and you have your current existing company, those profits that you make, what you can actually do, let's just say you've got consulting business A and you've got property company B. What you could do is lend from business A, your normal business, to business B at low rates, around about 3-ish% to make it all legit. Lend from one to the other and then use that money to invest in property. So instead of saying take 100k out and paying, maybe 40k tax on it, what you can do now is lend 100k across to the other business. That business then pays a low rate back, which you can offset against your profits, of course. Your new property investment business has that 100k to go and invest in. If you leverage up, that might get you a portfolio worth 400,000. That's great, that's happening. And anytime that property company starts to look like it's making decent profits and you want to lower your tax, you can pay back your original company. So it wins on so many levels. Hopefully that makes sense. It's easier when I draw this out, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute on how we might be able to help some of this come across even more easily for you. But if you want to ask me about it, just call into the office at RMP and I'm happy to talk you through it. But actually, in a week or so, you won't have to, because we've got something coming up that's going to help. And in fact, Rob, we may as well talk about that now. What have we got up our sleeves?
Well, we've mentioned it before, but we're creating a course on this topic. It's going to be free, of course, like all the courses on the Property Hub. The courses that we've got up there now are really popular. And when we've been putting these episodes together, there are so many instances where we thought, it'd be so much easier if we could just draw this out right now. And on a podcast, we can't really do that. But in a course, we've got the visuals as well. So if there's anything that hasn't been clear from what we've been talking about, hopefully it'll become more clear when you see it in action. So by the time this episode goes live, we should have it up. So if you go to thepropertyhub.net/courses, you should find it there.
So to answer the question, should you create a limited company for your property portfolio? The answer is definitely maybe. Definitely maybe. I believe that was an Oasis album. So definitely maybe is the answer, because for some people, you should seriously consider setting it up, especially business owners and contractors I've already talked about. But anybody starting out or who's only just started and you're in it for the long term, you should consider it. But unfortunately, actually, it's a lot of the more established investors who will feel the pain, the ones who are in it for the income now. Or even if they're not in for the income now, but they've built up a sizable portfolio with mortgages, they're getting hit as well. It's not as bad as it seems for some people. And as I've mentioned before, the destination, the long-term destination of financial freedom is still there. Just the vehicle you use now to get there has just changed. For a lot of people, it's just using a different vehicle. For some people, unfortunately, your car's broken down and it's going to be expensive to fix. But enough of the analogies, you get the point I'm making. Make sure you check out the course, the propertyhub.net/courses, where we can go into this more detail, use visuals to help get the points across. But if you have any comments or questions, make sure you go to thepropertyhub.net/LTD or not. That's the show notes for this week. That's thepropertyhub.net/LTD or not. And you can leave your comments in the forum. What do you think of some of the suggestions we've made? Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you've got anything else you can add, get over there and get your opinion on the forum, and other people too will comment and look at your views as well.
And above all, don't panic. I think the thing to take away from this is it's not easy. There are lots of things that you need to work out to decide on what the right course of action is going to be. There will be a right course of action. You just have to figure out what it is. There's no reason why this has to put a stop to your plans. But don't rush. I see investors in various forums really freaking out about this. But there's nearly 2 years until this even starts to come in. April 2017 is when it first starts to bite, and we've got until 2020 until it comes in full. That's plenty of time to figure it out. So as time goes on, you'll start to see what other investors are doing. Accountants will start to figure it out and give better advice, because there are some accountants who don't seem to really get this right now, and things will sort themselves out. So absolutely be ready to take action, but don't feel like you have to do it this week. Check out the resources that we're putting together, see how things pan out, take your time and get it right. Because if you get it right, you're going to save yourself a lot of money.
Like we said in the first episode on this subject, remember, those who are financially educated or educated in financial matters will be fine. You might not be as well off as you were. You might be better off, but you certainly won't get hit as hard as those people who just haven't built up their financial education. So the fact you listen to this podcast immediately puts you at an advantage. And of course, there's more tactics and tricks, or whatever you want to call them, come out in the future. We'll discuss them. So make sure you stick with the podcast. And if that's not enough to make you stick with the podcast, I'll bribe you with a nice resource of the week. And the resource of the week this week is Uber. You may have heard of Uber already. Some of you may not have heard of Uber, but Uber is great. I've started using it more and more recently. It's a reliable taxi service. You go on your app, you click where you are, you click where you want to get to, and it tells you the rate. Now, Uber has some controversy because it charges more when it rains, and they call it surge pricing and what have you. But it's like trying to find a normal taxi when it's raining. It's hard to do. But normally, when it's okay, you click where you are, you click where you want to get to, it tells you a rough price. You don't have to tip, it's all paid for within the app, so there's no cash exchanged. And that's great. But the reason why I really like it, and Rob, this probably appeals to you, when you travel, there are multiple cities Uber operates in. So New York, where Rob's just been, and multiple others. They're getting all over the UK now as well. I know Manchester has it. I know they're trying to roll it out in Liverpool and other cities. It's rolled out in most cities across the US now, most major cities. All the major cities in Europe are pretty much covered. There's still exceptions, but it's getting that way. But what you have is, have you ever been abroad? It's a bit of a pet hate of mine. You're getting a taxi from the airport, going to your destination, and then the young Italian or the young Spanish driver or whoever it is decides that they are not a taxi driver, but they are actually an F1 driver, and they will get you to your hotel in the new record time. And they are flying through the motorway to get you there, and you feel ill because you're getting thrown around so much. I've experienced that more than once. The nice thing about Uber is you rate the drivers, so they are incentivized to give a nice service and drive the way you would expect. Uber takes away that uncertainty, and that's the thing about all these apps these days. It uniforms out a service, and you just know what you're getting, which gives a lot of people comfort. But the reason why it's a bribe is if you haven't used Uber before, you can get £10 free credit when you download the app. So if you're listening to the podcast now and you're downloading the app, Uber, that's UBER, it'll ask you for a code if you've got one, a referral code. If you type in Rob B 1300, so ROBB1300, you'll get £10 free. I got a code when I started, off Tim Ferriss, of all people, on his podcast. I used that £10. There was no catches. You can top it up afterwards if you want, but your first ride's free. So one to check out.
Yeah, definitely. I have used this in multiple cities, and it is great because taxis do seem to be the Wild West. Wherever you go, in cities that are otherwise incredibly progressive and where everything's brilliant, you still get ripped off traveling from the airport. And for that reason, Uber is great. So convenient. I don't know how I'd feel about it if I was a taxi driver, but as a consumer, I love it. So well worth checking out.
Yeah, I'm sure we've got a lot of taxi drivers who listen. In fact, I know we have. So please don't hate us. But UK taxi driver is great. But when you're overseas, not so great. There you go. I think I've used balance. Okay, so that's our resource of the week. Something else we like talking about every week. You may not like it as much, but we certainly do. But we only do one a week now. It's our review, of course. And we read one out every week because you are all so lovely. And this week is from Happy Gamer. And Happy Gamer says, the two Robs make a great team. It's easygoing yet informative podcast, which I await with anticipation each week. Although a lot of it is rightly geared towards beginners, I wish I was around when I started 11 years ago, or more vanilla landlords, there are some definite gems even for those who've been in the sector for a few years. My immediate thoughts on this example was the excellent podcasts on the 18-year property cycle. The podcast does, however, help with one of the most important aspects of learning, repetition. I've discovered things I already knew, which was to strengthen my understanding and kept me motivated to continue on the path of property investment. Thanks, guys. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you. And it's great, that experienced landlord of 11 years, or investor, whatever you like to call yourself, still getting stuff from this as well. So, just what we've talked about then, it will appeal to new people, but it's some pretty high-level stuff there as well. So we do like to mix it up, and I'm glad it comes across that way.
Definitely. And while we're talking about iTunes, should quickly make a quick apology to anyone who subscribes on iTunes and has had any kind of delay or trouble accessing recent episodes. iTunes has been messing us around like crazy, but we think we have now fixed it. So we've been here every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. without fail. But iTunes hasn't always been playing ball, and it's disappeared or it's not been there at all. But we think we've got it all back on track now. But the way to get around that is to make sure that you're subscribed to the newsletter. Then you'll get an email as soon as every episode goes up as well. So you're not at the mercy of iTunes. But hopefully that hasn't affected you. And if it has, it shouldn't do from now on. Okay, so next week, no more budget. Quite enough of that for now. Instead, we're talking about something which I'm sure will keep people listening, Rob. How you lost £40,000.
Yeah, so if the budget didn't cost me enough, you can find out next week how I lost 40k in a deal. And painful, but a story that's important because property investment, and particularly a lot of people who put property knowledge out there, it's all like win, 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 riches. But it's not always like that. It's win, not win as much, lose, win again, win a little bit, do okay, win, and over the long term you get more wins and losses, hopefully. But it's not always an easy ride. So next week I'm going to talk to you about a pretty painful story of how I lost £40,000. But more on that next week when I'm brave enough to tell it.
And in the meantime, while you're waiting for that, do get over to propertyhub.net/courses, where you can check out the course that we've put together that really pulls together everything that we've been talking about over the last few weeks.
So until next week, where I will try and sound as chirpy as I normally do, even though it's a painful subject, we will bid you a great week. Remember, you've got the course that's coming up. You've got the petition that we mentioned earlier. Go to thepropertyhub.net/LTD or not to sign that. You can get the code. You can also get the Uber app as well using the code we mentioned. There's lots and lots of reasons why you should be jumping on the Property Hub, so make sure you do. But until next week, have a wonderful week, everyone. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.